Captain Daniel Rains awoke to the sharp bite of cold air against his skin. His head pounded, his limbs ached, and his throat felt like sandpaper. Blinking against the glare of an unfamiliar sun, he pushed himself upright, his boots sinking slightly into frost-covered soil. He wasn't on Earth anymore. The sky stretched vast and violet, with twin moons looming like silent sentinels overhead. A thick, primeval forest surrounded him, its dark foliage whispering in the wind. Then he heard it, the mechanical hum of a hovering drone. Instinct kicked in. He rolled into the underbrush, biting down a curse as thorns scraped his forearm. The drone passed over, scanning the ground where he had lain moments before. It was sleek, black, and unmistakably alien, its purpose evident, a hunter's tool. His heartbeat quickened, but not with fear. He had been in worse situations. This was just another battlefield, another enemy. The only difference was that this time he was the prey. The memories came rushing back. The ambush on his transport ship. The hulking, reptilian figures tearing through his squad with energy rifles. The paralysis, gas hissing through the vents. Then darkness. And now this. He had heard rumors of the Zarkari Empire's twisted tradition. Their elite warriors hunting other species for sport, testing their strength against the strongest their captives had to offer. A game. A challenge. Rains flexed his fingers, assessing his condition. No broken bones. Just a few bruises, and a headache from whatever tranquilizer they had pumped into him. He had no weapons, no gear, just the standard survival training drilled into every Green Beret. But that was more than enough. The Zarkari thought they had thrown a human into their little game. What they didn't realize was that they had just given him a reason to kill every last one of them. He moved swiftly, staying low, his eyes sweeping the terrain. The forest was dense, but offered natural cover. Large, gnarled roots protruded from the earth, creating barriers and vantage points. There was water nearby. He could hear the soft murmur of a stream. Good. He would need it. Survival came in steps. Assess, evade, adapt, and strike. A rustle in the trees made him freeze. He pressed himself against a thick trunk, breathing evenly. A shadow moved between the branches. No, several shadows. They were here, watching, testing his reactions. The Zarkari hunters were patient, skilled, and deadly, but they had already made their first mistake. They underestimated him. One of them stepped forward, finally revealing itself. 7 feet tall, clad in segmented armor that shimmered like liquid obsidian. Its elongated head bore a crown of rigid spines, and its 4-fingered hands flexed around the grip of a sleek, rifle-like weapon. A predator studying its prey. It tilted its head, mandibles clicking in amusement. Rain stared back, unflinching. He had fought insurgents in jungles, mercenaries in deserts, and things far worse in the blackness of space. A lizard in high-tech armor didn't even crack the top 5. The Zarkari's voice was a guttural growl, its translator warping the words into something harsh and mocking. Run, human. It is tradition to grant the hunted a chance. Rains gave a slow, deliberate nod. Appreciate the head start. Then he moved. Not away from the hunter, but toward it. The alien barely had time to react before Rains was inside its guard, ducking under its rifle and driving his fist into its throat. It staggered, hissing in shock. He grabbed its wrist, twisting sharply until he heard something crack, and the weapon clattered to the ground. The Zarkari lashed out with its free hand, claws aiming for his face. He twisted again, using its own momentum to drive it forward, straight into the jagged trunk of a tree. It screeched, momentarily stunned. That was all the time he needed. He scooped up the fallen rifle, turned and fired. The energy blast struck center mass, sending the alien crashing to the ground, its armor smoking. Silence. Then the forest erupted with movement. The rest of the hunting party surged forward, their stealth abandoned. 5 of them, fanning out, weapons raised. But Rains was already moving, diving into the underbrush, rolling behind the cover of twisted roots. A barrage of plasma fire shredded the foliage where he had been seconds earlier. They weren't laughing anymore. He checked the rifle settings. The Zarkari had an arrogance to their tech. This thing was finely tuned for their grip and their aim, but its mechanisms were understandable. He adjusted the power output, flipping a switch along the side. A deeper hum resonated from within. Footsteps. Heavy. Calculated. They weren't rushing blindly. These were elite hunters, disciplined and coordinated. Rains kept still, listening, counting. One had broken off to flank. Another was taking the high ground in the trees. They weren't just here to kill him. They wanted to draw this out. To toy with him. Big mistake. He looped around, keeping low, until he saw the flanker, a smaller, faster Zarkari, creeping forward, scanning the area. Rains exhaled slowly, then squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked in his hands, and the shot hit the alien's side, knocking it clean off its feet. Before it could recover, Rains closed the distance, finishing it with a precise shot to the throat. The others reacted instantly, converging on his position. But now he had the advantage. He kept moving, using the terrain, forcing them into tight quarters where their rifles were unwieldy. Another hunter dropped after he lured it into a deadfall trap. One he had set up minutes earlier with nothing but a few loose rocks and a fallen log. 3 left. Their movements had changed. They were no longer advancing confidently, no longer mocking. Rains could feel their hesitation. He grinned, wiping sweat from his brow. Not as fun when the prey fights back, huh? The largest of the remaining hunters snarled something in its native tongue and raised an arm. A signal. A streak of red light shot into the sky, a beacon, calling reinforcements. Rains watched it rise, then vanish into the clouds. Good. Let them come. The jungle was no longer just a hunting ground. It was a battlefield. The moment the distress signal streaked into the sky, Rains knew he had little time before more of them arrived. The remaining Zarkari hesitated, recalculating their approach. He had already taken down 3 of their squad, and they were starting to grasp what that meant. This was not sport anymore. This was survival. Rains shifted position, keeping to the underbrush, heart steady, mind sharp. The alien rifle in his grip was unfamiliar but functional. He had adjusted the settings, overriding the safety mechanisms to push the weapon's power output past its intended limits. Risky but effective. He had no intention of dragging this out. A faint rustle above made him glance up. One of them had taken to the trees, moving with practiced silence, trying to outmaneuver him. Smart. Rains respected the play, but he had already anticipated it. A discarded rifle from one of the fallen Zarkari lay a few feet away, its barrel half buried in the dirt. Carefully, he reached for a stone, weighing it in his palm before flicking it toward the weapon. It clattered against the metal. The reaction was instant. The Zarkari in the trees fired plasma bolts scorching the earth, kicking up debris where the noise had come from. A mistake. Rains had already lined up his shot. He squeezed the trigger. A sharp blast, and the sniper tumbled from the branches, crashing hard onto the jungle floor. It twitched once, then went still. 2 left. A guttural snarl echoed through the clearing as the remaining Zarkari repositioned, adapting to his tactics. These ones were experienced, their movements tighter, more coordinated. They were no longer playing with him. They were hunting in earnest, now, the way they had been trained to. But Rains was trained, too. A faint mechanical chirp pulsed in the air, barely audible. He recognized it instantly. Drones. They had switched strategies, deploying surveillance units to track his movements, boxing him in. He had to move. Rains sprinted low through the jungle, weaving between trees, listening. The drones weren't fast, but they didn't need to be. They would herd him, push him toward an open area where the remaining Zarkari would be waiting. They had learned from their mistakes. He slid down a slope, kicking up loose soil, then pressed himself against the roots of an ancient tree. The terrain was working against him. Less cover, more exposed ground. He needed a way to disrupt their plan. Then he spotted it. A cluster of large, bioluminescent fungi clung to the side of a fallen log. He had seen them before, earlier, when he had been assessing the jungle. When disturbed, the spores reacted violently, releasing a dense, toxic mist. The Zarkari might have built-in respirators in their armor, but their drones did not. Rains unhooked a fragment of discarded Zarkari plating he had taken earlier, crouched low, and hurled it into the cluster. The impact triggered an explosion of thick, shimmering mist, spreading rapidly. He moved fast, pressing a torn scrap of cloth over his nose and mouth. Seconds later, he heard the satisfying sputter of failing drone motors. The disruption worked. The hunters hesitated. That was all the time he needed. He circled wide, moving up an incline, flanking his pursuers. The first one had taken cover behind a boulder, scanning the mist for movement. Rains didn't give it a chance. He emerged from the haze like a phantom, closing the distance before the alien could react. One shot, a direct hit to the weak point at the base of its neck. The Zarkari gurgled once and collapsed. One left. The last hunter didn't retreat. It stood its ground, gripping its rifle tightly, mandibles flaring in open challenge. This one was different. It wasn't afraid. It wanted this fight. Rains stepped forward, leveling his weapon. The Zarkari tossed its rifle aside. A beat of silence passed between them. Then Rains exhaled and did the same. It charged first, fast and brutal, claws swiping in a calculated arc. Rains ducked, sidestepped, striking out with a precise jab to its ribs. The armor absorbed most of the impact, but the alien grunted, its posture shifting. It was strong, but he was faster. They traded blows, fists and claws, cutting through the damp air. A strike clipped Rain's side, sharp pain flaring along his ribs. He ignored it. He was used to pain. He welcomed it. The Zarkari lunged again, but this time Rains was ready. He caught the alien's arm, twisting sharply, using its own momentum to send it crashing to the ground. Before it could recover, he was on top of it, pinning it down. Its mandibles clicked in what might have been a snarl or laughter. "You fight well, human," it rasped. Rains didn't respond. He drove his fist into its throat, cutting off whatever it had been about to say. The body went limp beneath him. He sat back, catching his breath. The jungle was silent now, save for the distant hum of approaching ships. Reinforcements. Good. He picked up his weapon, turned toward the sky, and waited. The first ship descended in a controlled arc, its landing thrusters kicking up waves of dust and loose foliage. A sleek, armored vessel, black with iridescent purple markings, unmistakably Zarkari. It touched down with mechanical precision, and almost immediately, the side doors hissed open, releasing a squad of soldiers in full combat gear. They moved in formation, weapons at the ready, scanning for threats. Rains watched from the cover of the underbrush, his rifle steady, his breathing controlled. They weren't here to play games. The hunting party had failed, and now the Zarkari were treating him as what he had become, an enemy combatant, not prey. He counted their numbers. 12 on the ground, more inside the ship, and who knew how many in orbit. A direct assault would be suicide. A retreat was impossible. That left only one option, misdirection. He shifted his weight, adjusting his position as he observed their movements. The Zarkari were methodical, spreading out in a standard search pattern, using their drones to sweep the area. But he had already disabled one drone unit, and that meant they were missing a crucial piece of intelligence. They didn't know his exact position. That was his advantage. He spotted their leader, a taller, more heavily armored Zarkari with a commanding presence. It stood at the center of the formation, issuing orders in a guttural dialect, its voice carrying authority. This was the one he needed to eliminate first. Rains exhaled slowly, aimed and fired. The shot hit just beneath the leader's shoulder plate, where the armor was weakest. It staggered back with a hiss of pain, but before the others could react, Rains was already moving. He rolled from cover, snapping off another shot that struck one of the soldiers in the knee, sending it crashing to the ground. The squad erupted into motion, plasma fire lighting up the jungle, scorching the trees and undergrowth. Rains sprinted low, using the terrain to his advantage. He had no delusions of victory through sheer firepower. This wasn't a battle he could win in a firefight. But it didn't have to be. He just had to make them believe he could. He led them through the jungle, forcing them to split their forces, breaking their formation. Every time they hesitated, he struck, quick, precise, unrelenting. A fallen log became a sniper's perch, a rock outcropping a deadly ambush point. He made them chase shadows, drawing them deeper into unfamiliar terrain, forcing mistakes. One by one they fell. A Zarkari strayed too far from the group and found itself caught in a tripwire trap, impaled on jagged wooden spikes. Another turned at the wrong moment, just in time for Rain's knife to carve a crimson line across its throat. They had come expecting to capture or kill an animal. Instead, they had walked into the domain of something far worse. The leader realized too late what was happening. By the time it ordered a retreat, half its forces were gone, and the rest were panicked, their discipline shattered. That was when Rains made his final move. The Zarkari ship loomed ahead, its open hatch unguarded in the chaos. He sprinted for it, plasma bolts searing past him as the remaining soldiers scrambled to stop him. He dove inside, rolled to his feet, and snapped his rifle toward the pilot. The alien barely had time to react before a single shot ended its life. Alarms blared as he took the controls, his fingers flying across unfamiliar switches and interfaces. But he didn't need to understand Zarkari technology. He just needed to make the ship move. Engines roared to life. The vessel shuddered, lifting from the ground. Outside, the remaining Zarkari scrambled for cover, watching in disbelief as their own warship rose into the sky, carrying with it the man they had thought to hunt. Rains didn't look back. His mission wasn't over. Not yet. The Zarkari had chosen the wrong human, and soon the entire empire would know it.